Welcome to Buckeyes Tomorrow Morning for Monday, January 2nd. I'm your host, Tom Orr. The Indiana game is in 243 days, the game against Michigan in 327 days. Today is the second day of January of 2023. Good time to take a stock of where you are in your life, maybe make some resolutions, look at some things to change or to work on in the coming year. We're today going to do that for the Ohio State football team. The Peach Bowl left people with a lot of stuff to feel good about. The team played an incredible game, but came up short in the end. And we're kind of going to take a look at some of the reasons that may have sort of played into that, and that they're going to want to try and take an issue or take a look at moving forward. My guest today is Tony Gerdeman at BuckeyeHuddle.com. Tony, I think everyone on Twitter would agree the first thing Ohio State needs to take a look at is what's going on with the defense.
Yeah, and this being Jim Knowles' first year, if you look throughout his career at all of his stops, it takes it takes a few years for things to get to where he wants. Now, he was already, once he got here, things were more advanced than they had been at previous stops. But you wonder, he wanted a top 10 defense right away, and he had it for a while, but you need it all year long. And it's easy to have a top 10 defense against 80% of the Big Ten. But when you meet up with like-minded teams and elite teams, that's when you really find out who you are. And they found out that they have issues. They aren't where they need to be. They need to fix some things. It reminds me a little bit of last year's Rose Bowl, where you leave the thing feeling like you just saw something incredible. You got everything you needed from the guys played their hearts out. The only difference was Noah Ruggles made a kick, Noah Ruggles missed a kick. And you left that game last year thinking, well, you need to fix some fixes on defense, but things overall look pretty healthy. You leave this one saying, well, Ohio State played the kind of game offensively that you needed, but that defense still made some mistakes. I think we said, 10 plays of over 20 yards given up, and that's way more than the 5 that Jim Knowles is talking about. And Jim Knowles talks about 15-yard plays. I think there were another 5 to 6 plays of over 15 yards in that game as well. So overall, just a kind of a devastating breakdown. But the offense kept answering, so you felt like, you can contain this, or you can survive this, because Ohio State was able to stop Georgia's running game in the second half. And I don't know, maybe it was just a bunch of fool's gold going in there, and the offense kept making you think, no, this is the load that's going to bear out.
Yeah, our buddy Marcus Hartman from the Dayton Daily News had a great stat, which was Ohio State gave up 8.83 yards per play against Michigan. That was the most they'd ever given up in program history. And then they gave up 8.88 yards per play against Georgia, which is now the most they've ever given up in program history. And that is the caliber of team you're going to face in the college football playoff. That was literally half of the college football playoff field. And you don't have to be able to shut them out. No one is shutting anyone out in the college football playoff anymore. But you got to be able to do better than that. And if they had held them to 38 points instead of 42, well, they're still playing next week in Los Angeles. And I think the interesting thing is, other than there was a lot of fire Jim Knowles on Twitter, but there's always a lot of fire fill in the blank, whatever. But I think it's probably fair to say just about anything else is on the table. Are they looking? You probably have to take some time and evaluate position coaches. You have to probably take some time and evaluate personnel. And do you need to bring in someone in the portal to kind of patch over some holes? Because you're losing some guys, and are the other guys who are there all up to standard? It feels like this is an offseason where this is when Ryan Day walks back into the Woody. I think it has to be there are no bad ideas.
Yeah, everybody come to the table with something and be prepared to be brought to the table. I don't think anybody has coached a perfect season, and that's corners, that's safeties. I mean, you bring in 3 new defensive coaches in Perry Eliano, Tim Walton, Jim Knowles, and each of those guys had issues this year. Like nobody hit it out of the park. The injuries to the corners, I think, is significant. Injuries to the safeties and dealing with that constant turnover, and those guys playing new spots. I keep going back to, however, I don't know how much talent there is there in the secondary, but to continue to make those mistakes, I think it's a combination of coaching, scheme, and talent. Like they always say it is. Ryan Day, Urban Meyer always say it's not just one thing. It's never just one thing. It's coaching, it's talent, it's scheme. And in this case, I would agree with all of that, because you saw that bear out in many different ways. And I keep going back to Lathan Ransom turning and running in with Arian Smith and just falling down, or something like that. Or, Cam Brown against Michigan, just missing a tackle that he's there for. The scheme puts him there for. But I also do think Ohio State got schemed up when Arian Smith gets put on Tommy Eichenberg. I don't know how that happens. So, credit to the Georgia offense. But Ryan Day also schemed up Georgia very well defensively.
Yeah.
I just think the execution overall wasn't there. Scheme, do you think scheme was as big of a problem in this game as it was in Michigan? I don't think they made Georgia work hard enough. But I don't know, is that scheme? Is that just lack of execution?
And that's one of those. I'm going to wait to talk to Ross Fulton and have him tell me what I should think on that, because I'm watching from field level and obviously have not had a chance to rewatch the game yet. So I'm going to vote present on that and move on to the next one, which is injuries. And don't get hurt is like, well, that's a really stupid thing to say, because that's a lot that's out of your control. But I think this is another. There's no bad ideas. They have the new split film turf that they're playing on, that they're practicing on, that the NFLPA said, hey, it seems like there's an increased risk of injuries here. I think you got to look at strength and conditioning. Does the issue lie there? Because this is one of those things where we don't know where the issue lies. Is it just a complete coincidence? Maybe, but maybe not. Do they need to be doing more flexibility stuff? We saw Georgia doing yoga at practice on Thursday. Do they need to be looking at doing more flexibility as opposed to strength, or do they need to, is it a turf issue, or whatever the case may be? You can't have another season where you're down to you're running your fifth running back at one point. I mean, this was a season where hopefully it's an anomaly, and for Ohio State's case, it better be an anomaly injury-wise.
Well, you can consider Xavier Johnson your sixth running back behind Dallin Hayden, Chip Train. I mean, he's getting carries this season because they have nobody else. And, you lose Marvin Harrison and Cade Stover in this game. I don't think you can chalk that up to Ohio State's turf.
No.
I think this was one of those years with a ton of injuries, and it started with Jackson Smith and Jigba. Like we were talking about earlier this morning or last night. The season started with a targeting against Jackson Smith and Jigba that didn't get called, and it ends with a targeting against Marvin Harrison that got called but then overturned, and both of those plays knocked those guys out. And to lose, I think the Cade Stover loss is incredibly significant. Maybe people don't talk about it because now you replace him with Mitch Rossi, and Mitch Rossi's not a downfield guy like Cade Stover, so it changes what they want to do. And I'm sure it changed what they had planned to do. And would a Cade Stover in the passing game had been enough to overcome the loss of Marvin Harrison? Because there was incredible confusion at times with the tight ends coming in. Sam Hart, Joe Royer have really never played. I don't think they had played much, maybe a few snaps for Sam Hart, perhaps this season. Joe Royer's been hurt a little bit. But those guys come in. At one point, we were talking about it last night in the postgame show, they had 10 guys on the field, and they had to, shove Joe Royer out. There's another time where they shoved Sam Hart out. Somebody tried to push him back in, and somebody no, you need to be out there. And they got the snap off of 2 seconds. And so there's some coordination issues there. Offensive coordinator Kevin Wilson, the tight ends coach, on his way out. Not because of that. Yeah. But, it was the injuries have impacted things for stuff that, there's the butterfly effect of things. And then even having 5 cornerbacks start this year because of injuries is not something that Tim Walton ever expected.
No, definitely not. And, another spot where you saw it, you mentioned the injury to Jackson Smith-Jigba, the injury to Marvin Harrison. One thing that led to is you really dipped into your depth there. Not quite as much as at running back, but you really dipped into your depth at wide receiver. And I think we saw there's a pretty hard line where they feel good and then where they, the circle of trust kind of ends. And they really were banging up against that against Georgia in that Peach Bowl. You saw Jaden Ballard playing, but they didn't throw him, they didn't target him at all. They didn't throw the ball his direction. And, I think it's probably unfair to say, well, you should have, 6 wide receivers, 7 wide receivers who you feel you can trust at the level where you can play. I talked to Brian Hartline and asked him specifically about Jaden Ballard and at the media day before the game. And he said, basically, I have to feel like putting the next guy out on the field if I'm taking a guy off the field, and if I feel like the guy I'm putting out there is not as good as the people who were out there already, well, I'm not doing any good for the team. So continuing to develop some of those young wide receivers. I think that's one of the big issues this year. Jaden Ballard, the 4 freshmen. I mean, you are losing Jackson Smith-Njigba, which you already basically lost him. But, Julian Fleming could theoretically leave for the NFL. But then after next year, Marvin Harrison and Emeka Ibuka could leave for the NFL as well. You've got to really have some of those young guys take the next step this year.
Yeah, you've got to get to get almost nothing, virtually nothing from the 2022 class. What, maybe 3 catches from
2 or 3,
combined, and from 4 guys. And Caleb Burton, I don't think ever saw the field, and so the other 3 only saw the field sparingly. Those guys need to be part of the deal next year, and if you can only count on the 2023 freshmen so much because we saw how little you got from the 2022 freshman class, and it's rare for 2 guys in a class to step up the same year. It's usually just 1, if that. And so there's a lot of pressure on those guys. And you saw when you could only play 3 guys, 4 guys in the Peach Bowl, how much it impacts the production level that they have going throughout the game. And then, of course, you play a guy and he ends up getting hurt. But then also, I get, why isn't Marvin Harrison out there? Like, there were times like that, and when they would play their 6 receivers and they would bring 3 in, bring 3 out. And Marvin Harrison is so good, and this is a game where you don't necessarily need to take him out. But Julian Fleming, Jaden Ballard, that type of level, like how far apart are they? And if Jaden Ballard isn't as good as Julian Fleming, does that mean it's a philosophy thing? But if he's better than 90% of the Big Ten, why can't he play? And maybe he's better than an 85% Julian Fleming. Julian Fleming needs a blow, something like that. It's just different philosophies for different guys, I guess.
All right, so the last thing we need to talk about is offensive line depth, and that's a spot where they were pretty healthy for the most part outside of Matt Jones this year, but Matt Jones he has the opportunity to come back. We'll see if he decides to go to the NFL or not. Paris Johnson likely off to the NFL. DeJuan Jones likely off to the NFL. So you're losing 2 to potentially 3 offensive linemen. And right now, this year, the circle of trust only went about 7 deep. It was the 5 starters and Idik Famahi and Josh Fryer. And everyone else was kind of, there are guys they like, but not guys they feel are ready to play yet. So if you only have 2 to 3 guys coming back and you only have 2 backups you trust, nobody better get hurt next year, and everyone better be able to play their new position because you're going to do some shuffling as well there. That feels like a spot where either through the portal or just through development and, year 2 with Justin Fry, they've got to find probably at least 2 to 4 guys who they can trust by the time the season kicks off against Indiana.
Yeah, and Enoch Vamahi was in the circle of trust, but it's like they didn't tell him everything. They didn't tell him all of the secrets, and he needs to get in there and because he may be starting because we still don't know what this offensive line is going to look like next year. Where's Josh Fryer? Is he right tackle? Donovan Jackson stay left guard. Does he move to left tackle? I think they need obviously to get. They can get a left tackle in the portal, and they're after a couple. That would be huge for them. And I think you also go get another guy to come in and compete somewhere and rebuild so you have another 7 guys that you trust because there are some guys on this roster that are never going to play. And whether they realize that now or a year from now, your depth is they're not really depth anyway. So you need to build that up and find 7 guys that you are comfortable in and playing. And, you don't know what maybe somebody takes a step in the spring and you feel a lot better. Somebody will have to because there's going to be a lot of guys getting a lot of reps. So you would hope somebody steps up. But I think the portal is the key for a left tackle. And if they can't go to the portal for a left tackle, that could be something to watch all season long. And I wouldn't be surprised if it's more than one guy that gets a look there.
Yeah, if they don't find a left tackle in the portal, boy, you better hope Donovan Jackson works out. I mean, the Paris Johnson move from guard to tackle worked out fine this year, but Paris Johnson was always sort of thought of as a tackle. Donovan Jackson is always sort of Paris Johnson was always sort of thought of as a tackle. Donovan Jackson has always felt more like a guard, I think, to most people. So you're probably stretching him a little bit to push him out there. So yeah, that's going to be one of the big storylines to watch as we go through spring ball and summer and all of that kind of stuff. There's going to be a lot to talk about this year as Ohio State falls just short against Georgia, and very very nearly earning a spot in the national championship game. So now you get to start all over again, and we'll start all over with transfer portal, NFL declarations, or National Signing Day, winter workouts, spring ball, and then on to the summer and on to the fall again. Everything old is new again with Ohio State football and at BuckeyeHuddle.com. Should be a really, really fascinating offseason. A lot of NFL draft decisions coming. Will probably be a very active season in the portal as well, both coming in and going out. So you can follow along with all of that with us at BuckeyeHuddle.com. And of course, we're not stopping with the podcast on YouTube either, or on your podcast platform of choice. We had people on our pregame show saying, "Boy, I wish you guys did these shows all year round." It's like, oh, friends, don't you have no idea. We do these shows all year round. So make sure you are subscribed as well at youtube.com/BuckeyeHuddle. Thank you guys all for joining us. Have a great day. We'll talk to you tomorrow.